With self-employment undergoing exponential growth, issues and policies affecting the self-employed are in the news daily. At IPSE today we're going to bring you the start of a new feature where we kind of talk and comment around all the issues that affect you, the self-employed. So I'm joined by my colleague Jordan Marshall, who's IPSE's Policy Development Manager. And we're going to discuss some of the topics this week that might be of interest. So we're going to start with the Taylor Review. Matthew Taylor was commissioned by the government to carry out a review of modern employment practices such as the gig economy. He submitted that at the beginning of the summer, and the government were expected to respond this week, but they've announced they're postponing it to the new year. Why is that?
Yeah, that's right. The government is completely fixated by Brexit at the moment, so there just aren't any major policy announcements coming before the end of the year. So that's where we're at the moment. There's also the suggestion that some Conservative MPs on the right of the party aren't happy with some of the recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
They're worried that there'll be additional costs on employers. So she's under political pressure over this review, and there just isn't, it won't get the attention that she wants it to get with Brexit progressing as it is.
And it's a very comprehensive document. Of all the recommendations that he puts forward, which are the government most likely to kind of implement, and what does that mean for the self-employed?
Well, we've spoken to some of the civil servants who are leading on the review, and they're worried that, again, with Brexit, there isn't the parliamentary time to do some of the more difficult things. So we're very interested in the recommendations around employment status. They are recommending more clarity around employment status, which is something that we really agree with. We want to see a statutory definition of self-employment, and they're likely to consult on that, but that's going to be quite a long, drawn-out process. In terms of things that they might try and do sooner, there's the ambition to try and define what good work looks like. This isn't something that needs legislation, but it's something that we're going to be feeding into. You know, what does good self-employment look like? Sure. So that's something that they might focus on initially.
Sure. So one company that will be paying particularly close attention to the outcome of the government's response will be Uber. Now, Uber this year have been involved in a very high-profile employment tribunal with two of the drivers that use their app to find work. Now, Uber have always upheld the view that their drivers are self-employed, but the courts have twice gone against them. And Uber this week have had an appeal directly to the Supreme Court turned down, and they will have to go through the Court of Appeals first. Why do we think the original ruling was wrong?
Well, firstly, it's a really complicated issue, employment status. It's something that we think there should be more clarity on in law, and that's why we want to see government come up with a statutory definition of self-employment, so we don't have these really protracted legal cases. On Uber, we were a bit surprised that they ignored the fact that Uber drivers don't have to turn the app on at all. Mm-hmm. There's no obligation for them to work, and there's no obligation for them to work a set number of hours. And that's traditionally been a very strong indicator of being self-employed. And the tribunal so far have seemed to ignore that point. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens when it goes to the Court of Appeal and then possibly even the Supreme Court. It's going to rumble on for quite a while.
So obviously the gig economy is a very, very new commodity, and Uber is a very significant part of that. How big are the ramifications of this tribunal ruling, and could it set precedent throughout the whole gig economy?
Well, each trial, each circumstance is considered on its own merits. So there aren't necessarily wider ramifications. However, it may encourage other people to look to challenge employment status because it obviously generates so much publicity. So, I mean, it is something that's going to be topical in the gig economy over the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And obviously there seems to be a lot of inconsistencies. Uber lost their case, Deliveroo won it. What do we need to implement so that we can kind of get rid of this reliance on the courts? And if something isn't done quickly, is there going to be a large, protracted employment tribunal for every gig economy company?
That is certainly how it seems to be going at the moment. It's not only Deliveroo and Uber, there are lots of other cases going on. So what we really want to see, and what we argued in our response to the Taylor Review, was that there should be a definition of self-employment in law. So there is greater clarity about what is self-employment and what isn't self-employment. Mm-hmm. That will help these individuals who might be being exploited, and it will help these organisations looking to engage self-employed people. Okay. They'll actually know what self-employment looks like.
Mm-hmm. Deliveroo. Now, Deliveroo have had a similar tribunal which they have won against their riders who have been deemed self-employed. This week, Deliveroo have announced that they're rolling out some insurance policies for their riders, which will protect them in the event of illness or injury. A lot of MPs and unions and things like that have raised concerns about Deliveroo and their engagement with their riders. Will this announcement appease those people, and how significant is it for their riders?
It's about changing the perception that Deliveroo isn't treating its riders well.
Mm-hmm.
So in that respect, perhaps it's a good move by Deliveroo. In terms of what the riders get, I think they pay about £1.85 a week, and then they get cover for injury or illness if it's sustained while the app is turned on.
Mm-hmm.
They get cover based on the previous 12 months' earnings. So for the riders, it seems like a decent deal, and for Deliveroo, it helps their reputation perhaps at a relatively low cost. So it seems like quite a sensible move from them.
Mm-hmm. So deviating from the gig economy slightly, the government released its industrial strategy last week. So it's a very, very comprehensive document that outlines all the ways in which the UK can hopefully increase productivity, boost economic growth, things like that. Innovation was discussed essentially, but there wasn't one mention of the self-employed. How big a concern is that?
It's a bit strange.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge document, as you said. I think it was 254 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks a lot about spreading economic growth around the country, encouraging innovation. So these are exactly the things that self-employment helps to deliver. So it is quite disappointing. There are a few things in there which self-employed people should be happy about, though. There's a really big focus on training and upskilling, which is really important for self-employed people because it allows you to earn more money, work on the projects you want to work on. So that's quite encouraging. There's also the construction sector deal, which was announced, which is going to look at reforming how training is delivered in the construction sector, which we think is really encouraging because from what we've heard, there are lots of problems with how it's delivered through the Construction Industry Training Board.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we're going to be working on with government over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. So like you mentioned there, although self-employment wasn't mentioned directly, there was a lot of kind of ideas and initiatives that were suggested that would both benefit from self-employment and be a benefit to self-employment. Mm-hmm. How important is it that the government kind of makes these policies and initiatives surrounded by and immersed with self-employment?
It's absolutely essential. That's true. Self-employment has expanded hugely over the last few years, and there are cracks in the system. If we look at the tax system, if we look at pensions, if we look at how tax treatment training works, it doesn't seem like self-employment is really well dealt with in all these different areas of policy, and that's where we come in, and we try and we try and tell policymakers how they can better help the self-employed.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So next week we're going to be talking a little bit about universal credit. Now at IPSE we've been asked to submit some evidence by a select committee about the effect that universal credit will have on the self-employed. Obviously universal credit has been making major waves in the news over the past months and weeks about its wider impacts on the UK. So join us next week where we'll be talking about universal credit and any other important issues that pop up in the news. Thank you.